My name is Stella, and the journey of my life has been nothing short of a roller coaster ride, one that took me from privilege to unexpected challenges. I was born into a world of affluence, the adored only child of my wealthy parents. My father, Matto, was a successful businessman with a reputation for shrewd investments, while my mother, Haley, was the city's beloved socialite, renowned for hosting the grandest soirees. My childhood was a cocoon of love, luxury, and endless possibilities, and I never wanted for anything. As I entered college, my life's singular focus became making my parents proud. I immersed myself in my studies, determined to meet their high expectations. But then, Jason walked into my life. His persistence was like nothing I had ever experienced. He would wait outside my classes, surprise me with coffee during late-night study sessions, and even show up uninvited at our home, always with a warm smile and an air of confidence. One evening, he took the bold step of declaring his feelings. In the living room, with my parents seated on the couch, he looked them both in the eye and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I am deeply in love with your daughter. I want you to know I have serious intentions." To my surprise, my father, who had always dreamed of having a son, took an immediate liking to Jason. He saw in him the qualities he valued: ambition, loyalty, and the promise of a successful future. He even encouraged me to give Jason a chance, insisting he seemed like a fine match. Reluctantly, I agreed. And Jason didn't disappoint. His charm, thoughtfulness, and unwavering dedication won me over, slowly but surely. Before long, our relationship blossomed, and we married shortly after graduation. My parents, especially my father, were overjoyed. Jason was the son my father had always hoped for, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. At our wedding reception, my father beamed with pride as he welcomed Jason into the family. He didn't just offer his congratulations, he also invested in Jason's future. He helped him start a car wash business and generously assisted us in purchasing our first home, a quaint little house where we began building our new life together. Then came the best gift of all, our son, Wyatt. Holding him for the first time was like a light turning on in my soul, a love more profound than anything I'd known. I poured myself into motherhood, putting aside everything else to focus solely on Wyatt's needs. He grew from a lively toddler to a curious child, and eventually into a thoughtful teenager. But while life for me settled into a comforting rhythm, Jason was facing struggles of his own. The car wash business, once promising, started to falter. He began to feel overshadowed by my father's influence and support, which only deepened his frustration. And so, life, it seemed, had begun to take an unexpected turn, a new chapter I had never anticipated. He frequently lashed out, feeling belittled by what he perceived as handouts. Despite my efforts to comfort him, our home life became tense, filled with arguments that left me treading lightly to avoid conflict. Wyatt, sensing the strain, retreated into himself, spending more time alone or with friends. As years passed, the physical toll of stress and motherhood reshaped me. I was no longer the trim college student Jason had pursued. He pointed out my changed appearance disparagingly, suggesting I had let myself go. Despite the hurt these words caused, I told myself he was simply stressed and didn't mean them. Yet, as I navigated these challenges, I realized the importance of finding strength within and cherishing my worth, regardless of the storms life brought. As I navigated the tempestuous waters of my life, it became painfully clear that the foundations of my marriage to Jason were crumbling. Then, one sunny Tuesday that seemed like any other, I received a devastating phone call. A somber voice informed me, "Mrs. Thompson, I regret to inform you that your parents have been involved in a small plane crash in Florida. I'm sorry, but they didn't survive."
Are you ready?
The following weeks were a blur of funeral arrangements and settling estates, a process made even more challenging by Jason's startling absence. When Jason was present, his demeanor was unsettlingly upbeat. Just a week after the funeral, he began pressing me about the inheritance. "Have you talked to the lawyer yet? We need to sort this out, he urged, his tone shockingly indifferent to my grief. I was taken aback by his insensitivity. Jason, can't this wait? I'm still grieving, I said, to which he replied bluntly, business doesn't wait, Stella. We need to know where we stand financially. With a heavy heart, I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Hudson, our family lawyer. In Mr. Hudson's elegantly appointed office, the atmosphere was tense. He began, Mrs. Thompson, your parents' will is quite unique. It's split into 2 parts, and I can only disclose the first part now. The second will be revealed in exactly 1 year. Jason leaned in eagerly as Mr. Hudson continued. The mansion is left to your future grandchildren, with their guardians acting as trustees until they come of age. I was dumbfounded. Wyatt, our only son, wasn't even married. Wyatt, who had insisted on attending, reacted with a surprising, well, that opens up some interesting possibilities. His casual remark puzzled me, but before I could question him, Jason interjected angrily. That's it? What about the rest? The businesses? The money? Mr. Hudson firmly replied, the rest will be revealed next year. As we left the office, the dynamics between us had palpably shifted. Jason was unusually silent and Wyatt appeared contemplative. Not long after the will's initial reading, Wyatt made a startling announcement at dinner. Mom, Dad, there's someone I want you to meet. The following day he introduced us to Ma, a pretty young woman with a guarded smile. This is my wife, and she's pregnant with our child, he declared. I was stunned. Wife? Pregnant? How had this all happened so quickly? Wyatt explained they had married hastily upon learning of the pregnancy. I glanced at Jason, who seemed oddly pleased, nodding in approval. Something felt unsettling about the situation, but I shelled my doubts, focusing instead on the fact that I was about to become a grandmother. Congratulations, I managed to say, mustering enthusiasm. Ma's smile widened. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I'm so excited to be part of your family. Ma moved in soon after, citing the need for family support during her pregnancy. Initially, I was thrilled to have another woman in the house, but as time passed, the household dynamics shifted dramatically. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this sudden marriage than met the eye. Yet, amidst the chaos and secrets, I found a new role awaiting me, one that promised a different kind of love and connection. It soon became clear that Ma had her plans, which involved undermining me subtly. Whenever I cooked, she'd grimace and make comments suggesting I was doing it wrong. Her interactions with Jason were even more alarming. She would laugh at his jokes, touch his arm, and shower him with compliments, praising his business acumen. Jason predictably enjoyed the attention and started spending more time at home, but not with me. He would discuss business with Ma for hours, while I felt pushed aside. I tried discussing Ma's behavior with Wyatt, but he dismissed my concerns, suggesting I was just jealous because I wasn't the center of attention anymore. His words stung deeply, and it pained me to think that my son was so dismissive of my feelings. Jason, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in this new family dynamic, clearly enjoying the praise and looking at me with something that felt like contempt. One day, while grocery shopping, I bumped into Ruby, an old college friend. We caught up over coffee, and during our conversation, she brought up a memory that chilled me. She reminisced about a guy from our college days who pursued wealthy girls, a guy named Jason. My heart raced as she described him as the kind of person who ended up marrying a naive rich girl. The more she described, the more I realized she was talking about my Jason. My stomach twisted in knots as I drove home, the weight of the day's revelations settling in. I had always trusted Jason, but now I was beginning to wonder if our marriage had been nothing more than a carefully crafted lie. Was I just a pawn in his pursuit of wealth? When I arrived, I found Jason in his study, looking as composed as ever. But I couldn't hold back anymore. I confronted him, demanding the truth about everything I'd discovered. At first, he tried to brush it off, pretending it was all in my head. But the brief flicker of fear in his eyes gave him away. I pressed him further, and with a cold laugh, he finally admitted it. He had married me for my family's money. He never loved me. My heart shattered as he casually dropped the bombshell. calling me a burden. The realization hit me like a freight train. I had been nothing more than a stepping stone in his climb up the social ladder, a means to an end. But Jason's words grew darker. He told me, without an ounce of remorse, that now that my parents were gone, he didn't need me anymore. Their wealth was about to be his, not for the sake of our son, but for his own control. He laid it all bare, revealing a chilling truth that I had been blind to all along. Wyatt's rushed marriage, Ma's pregnancy, and their disdain for me had all been part of the plan. A plan to seize everything I had once held dear. "You planned all this?" My voice barely rose above a whisper, disbelief choking me. Jason's laugh echoed off the walls, cruel and mocking. "Don't give me all the credit," he sneered. "It was Wyatt's idea. The boy has a good head for business, unlike you." I felt the room closing in on me, suffocating under the weight of their betrayal. "Does Ma know?" I whispered, already knowing the answer. "Of course," Jason smirked, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "She's not stupid. She knows a good opportunity when she sees one. She'll make a proper wife for a businessman." I couldn't listen any longer. The words stung like venom, each one more poisonous than the last. I fled the room, my heart breaking as the truth shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. What was I left with? No family, no friends, no financial independence. I had nowhere to go, no way to start over. My entire existence was tied to this house that no longer felt like home. 3 months later, the next bombshell came. Jason walked into the kitchen, his face twisted in satisfaction. "Pack your bags, Stella," he said coldly. "We're moving into your parents' house." The words were a blow to the chest. "When did we decide this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We didn't," he sneered. "I decided. We're moving in with Wyatt and Ma. After all, our grandson is the heir to that house now." Every word felt like a slap, each one stinging deeper than the last. "What about our house?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Jason waved me off with a dismissive gesture. "Oh, that? I sold it. The money's already spent on things for people I actually care about, and you're not on that list." The days that followed were a blur of silent agony. I watched as Jason, Wyatt, and Ma eagerly prepared for the move. They indulged in new cars, luxurious clothes, and all the trappings of wealth while I was ignored, left to wither in a house that no longer felt like mine. Moving into my parents' home was nothing short of a cruel journey. It wasn't a fresh start. It was a reminder of everything I had lost, everything I had sacrificed. Ma claimed the master bedroom immediately, relegating me to a small guest room at the back of the house. As days turned into weeks, my isolation deepened. Ma had her baby and turned the house into her kingdom, with me as her reluctant servant. "Stella, the baby needs changing," she would call out. "And could you tidy up the living room? It's a bit messy." Despite the pain, I found a small comfort in caring for my grandson, his innocent smile a bittersweet solace. But one evening, about a month after the move, I reached my breaking point. At dinner, which I had prepared, Ma was particularly demanding. "Stella, fetch me some more water and hurry up with clearing these plates," she ordered. Something inside me snapped. All the years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. "Enough!" I shouted, slamming my hands on the table. "I am not your maid, Ma. This is my parents' house, and I deserve some respect." The room fell into stunned silence as Ma's face crumpled, unable to respond to the sudden assertion of my dignity. And so, Ma erupted into melodramatic tears, accusing me of harshness after everything they had supposedly done for me. Jason, his face flushed with anger, declared he'd had enough of my supposed ingratitude. "Pack your things and leave. This house belongs to our grandson now, and you're no longer welcome here," he announced. I was in shock, scarcely believing his words. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice tinged with desperation. Jason nonchalantly pulled out a stack of papers from his pocket. "I've been waiting for the right moment to give you these," he said, handing me divorce papers that were already signed. "I want you gone by morning." I turned to Wyatt, desperate for some sign of support, but he merely shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I'm an adult now, Mom. I don't need you anymore." With trembling hands, I accepted the papers, the weight of them heavy in my grasp. As I turned to leave the dining room, Ma's smug smirk lingered in my mind, the last image I'd see before my world seemed to shatter completely. The house that once felt like home now felt like a prison, and I felt utterly alone, lost in a sea of betrayal and confusion. I had no place to go, no one to turn to. My heart ached with a loneliness I couldn't escape. With no other option, I dialed a familiar number, hoping for some comfort, some reprieve from the storm swirling inside me. "Ruby," I whispered when she answered. "I need a place to stay." Without hesitation, Ruby's voice was warm and immediate. "Of course you can stay here. My guest room is all yours." I drove to Ruby's house, the comfort of her kindness a small balm to my wounded soul. She had always been my rock, my closest friend since college. As we settled in, I could sense something was off with her too. Over tea, she confided in me that her son, who had recently been abandoned by his pregnant fiancée, was struggling to cope. Curiosity piqued, I asked if she had a picture of the woman. When Ruby showed me the photo, my heart stopped. There, staring back at me, was Ma. The very woman who had caused me so much pain. The woman whose selfishness and greed had torn apart my life. "Ruby," I began slowly, the truth dawning on me. "I think I know where your son's fiancée is." The realization was staggering. We spent hours talking, and I shared every detail of my own ordeal. Ruby's face shifted from shock to anger, and then finally, to determination. "We need to expose them," she said, her voice low but firm. "We can't let them get away with this." Together, we devised a plan to bring the truth to light. The next day, I returned to my parents' house under the guise of collecting a few belongings. Inside, my heart raced as I quietly gathered what I needed. A few strands of my grandson's hair, enough for a DNA test. It was a small victory in what had been a long, drawn-out battle, but I felt a glimmer of hope. The waiting for the results was agonizing, but when the truth finally came through, it was everything I had feared. Ruby's son was the father of Ma's baby, not Wyatt. The lie that had been so carefully crafted fell apart in an instant. As I sat there, processing this new revelation, my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Hudson, my parents' lawyer. He asked me to meet with him the following day to review the second part of my parents' will. Heart pounding, I met him in his office, unsure of what I was about to hear. He unfolded the will before me, reading it aloud. "To our beloved daughter, Stella," he began, his voice measured. "We leave our luxury apartment, valued at $610,000. But then," he paused, "there's more." I leaned forward, breath caught in my throat. "In the event of a divorce, all of our property, including the business Jason was involved in, would revert to you." My mind raced as he explained. My father had secretly been the financier behind Jason's car wash business, and everything had been registered in his name. Jason had never known that the wealth he thought was in his grasp was actually mine all along. As Mr. Hudson spoke, the fog lifted. All these months, I had thought I had nothing, that I had lost everything. But in reality, I had everything. The house, the assets, everything. "And what about the house Jason sold?" I asked, my voice trembling with a new sense of power. "Don't worry about that," Mr. Hudson reassured me. "That's the only thing Jason can claim. Everything else is yours." The weight of it all began to sink in. The pieces of the puzzle fit together in an unexpected way. Jason had tried to outsmart me, to take everything I had, but in the end, it was he who had been outwitted. His plan had unraveled spectacularly, and I was the one who came out on top. When I first stepped into my new apartment, I couldn't believe my eyes. It was everything I had ever wanted: a sanctuary, a place of peace and beauty. Sleek lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and elegant furnishings that radiated modern sophistication. It felt like a new beginning, like I was finally reclaiming what was mine. As I stood there, taking it all in, my phone rang. It was Wyatt. "Mom," he said, his tone urgent, demanding. "It's been a year since we read the first part of the will. We need to know what's in the second part." I could hear the entitlement in his voice, the same arrogance I had always been afraid of. I let out a long breath, steadying myself before I responded. "I know what's in it, Wyatt," I said softly, but with a strength I didn't know I had. "And you're not going to like it." His silence on the other end spoke volumes. For the first time, I felt the power shift. "I'm sure Grandma and Grandpa left everything to me, right?" His assumption made me inwardly smirk. "Wyatt, this isn't a conversation for the phone. Why don't you, Ma, and your father come over tomorrow? I'll text you the address," I said calmly, then hung up. Immediately after, I called Ruby. "It's time," I told her. "Can you come over tomorrow morning? We're going to settle this once and for all." The next day, I heard the doorbell ring and took a deep breath before opening the door. Jason, Wyatt, Ma, and the baby stood there, mouths agape as they took in the opulence of my apartment. Wyatt whistled in admiration. "Wow, Mom, this place is amazing. I can't wait to move in." Ma's eyes sparkled with avarice as she remarked, "Yes, it'll be so nice once we change all this old lady decor, and of course once we get rid of you, Stella." I raised an eyebrow at her audacity. "I wouldn't be so hasty if I were you," I replied, inviting them to sit on the plush sofa. I excused myself briefly, and when I returned, Ruby was with me, her presence causing Ma to visibly pale. "Before we discussed the will," I began, my voice steady, "there's someone I'd like you all to meet. This is my friend Ruby." Ma's eyes darted around, seeking an escape, while Wyatt and Jason looked merely confused. "Now," I continued, "I think it's time we had a frank discussion. There are some truths that need to be revealed." I savored the moment, having rehearsed my words all night. The revelations I was about to unveil would change everything. As I faced those who had betrayed me, my ex-husband, my son, and the woman who had almost usurped my place, I felt a surge of righteous indignation. Ruby stepped closer, and Jason recognized her, his face twisting into a bitter smirk. "Well, well," he sneered. "Looks like I achieved my goal after all. Married a rich fool, didn't I?" His words stung, but I remained composed. "We'll address your betrayal later, Jason. Right now, there's something more pressing." I turned to Ma, who squirmed under the scrutiny. "We know the truth about you, Ma." "Wyatt," I said, turning to my son, whose face was a mask of confusion. "When Ma heard about the will from you, she saw an opportunity. She decided to pass off someone else's child as your own to secure your grandparents' estate." Ruby's voice was steady as she delivered the final blow. "The baby isn't Wyatt's, it's my son's child." The room fell deathly silent. I then presented the DNA test results. As the truth sank in, Ma's face lost all color. In a sudden flurry, she grabbed her bag. "I don't need this. I don't need a beggar's child," she declared, storming out of the apartment. Wyatt stood shell-shocked, the baby still in his arms, looking utterly lost. Jason, recovering from his initial shock, asked in a small voice, "So, who gets this apartment?" I smiled, ready to enlighten him. "Well, Jason, let me tell you about the second part of my parents' will," I explained. As I detailed the specifics of the inheritance, the apartment, the car, all of it, Jason's face fell further with each revelation. Suddenly, he was on his knees. "Stella, please, I'm sorry, forgive me." His plea barely registered as I considered all that had transpired, the weight of their deceit still lingering, but now tempered by the justice of their unraveling plans. I could feel the tension in the air as I looked at him, my voice cold and unwavering. "Get out, Jason. You have 2 days to leave my parents' house, or I'll call the police." Jason scrambled to his feet, a look of desperation flashing across his face. He turned to Wyatt and said, "Give me the car I bought you. I need something." Wyatt's response was quick and firm. "No, it's mine. You're not getting anything from me." With one last look of frustration, Jason slunk out of the apartment, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I turned to Wyatt, who stood there, his head lowered in shame. Ruby, standing beside us, gently took the baby from his arms. I spoke to Wyatt with a tone that was firm, yet not unkind. "Since it turns out I don't have any grandchildren and there are no other heirs to your grandparents' house besides me, I need you to move out as well." Wyatt didn't meet my eyes as he nodded. "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I'll go pack my things." Without another word, he too left the apartment. As the door closed behind him, the heavy silence filled the room. The only sound now was the soft cooing of the baby in Ruby's arms. I looked at my old friend, feeling a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a strange sense of freedom. "Well," I said, managing a small smile, "that didn't go exactly as I expected when I woke up this morning." Ruby chuckled softly, bouncing the baby in her arms as I sank into the plush sofa, the weight of the day finally starting to settle in. "You did what you had to do, Stella. They left you no choice," she said, her voice filled with a quiet understanding. I nodded, my thoughts swirling. For the first time in years, the weight on my shoulders had lifted. I was no longer trapped in a web of lies and manipulation. I could finally breathe, free to live life on my own terms. The months that followed that fateful confrontation were a whirlwind of change and self-discovery. I had gone from feeling suffocated by my past to standing on the precipice of a new life, one where I held the power to choose my own path. My luxurious new apartment quickly became my sanctuary, a place where peace reigned, and I could start over without the haunting presence of betrayal looming over me. The quiet elegance of the place matched the calm I had finally begun to find within myself. One of my first decisions was to rent out my parents' house. It felt right to have a young family move in, people who would appreciate the history and warmth that had once been mine. The income from the rental, combined with the profits from selling Jason's car wash business, gave me the financial cushion I needed to truly embrace my newfound freedom. Ruby and I spent more time together. Over countless cups of coffee, we swapped stories, laughed at the absurdity of life, and leaned on each other for support. The connection we had deepened, both of us navigating the twists and turns of our new lives, side by side. Then there was little Jason, Ruby's grandson, the child I had once believed to be my own. Despite the tangled web of deception that surrounded his birth, I found myself growing increasingly attached to him. His laugh was infectious, his wide-eyed curiosity a reminder that life, no matter how complicated, could still hold moments of pure joy. "He has your eyes," Ruby would tease during our visits, and we'd both laugh, finding solace in humor as we looked back at the bizarre and often painful path our lives had taken. As for Wyatt, rebuilding our relationship was slow, painful, and filled with awkward silences. The betrayal had cut deep, but he was still my son, and I couldn't completely sever the bond we shared. Our interactions started with hesitant phone calls and tense meetings at neutral coffee shops, but over time we began to rebuild, tentatively, but steadily. The wounds were still raw, but healing was happening in its own way. Jason, on the other hand, was nothing more than a distant memory now. I heard through the grapevine that his once grandiose dreams of wealth and status had crumbled, all because his lies had been exposed. The man I had once loved, the man who had destroyed me, was now nothing more than a shadow of my past. I ran into him only once, by chance, as I drove through town. He was working at a small kiosk, his shoulders slumped, looking older and more worn than I had ever seen him. For a brief moment, our eyes met across the street, There was no anger, no bitterness, no lingering desire for revenge, only a sense of closure. The light changed and I drove on, leaving that chapter of my life firmly in the rearview mirror. And so, life moved on. With each passing day, I felt more at peace. The storm had passed, and I was finally free from the chaos of the past. I embraced the life I had fought so hard to create, knowing it wasn't perfect, but it was mine.